The moment I heard her voice, sharp, mocking, dripping with cruelty, I froze behind the half-open kitchen door. I wasn't meant to hear it. I wasn't supposed to be standing there. But fate has a way of revealing the truth at the exact moment you're strong enough to face it. "That fat old lady disgusts me," my daughter-in-law sneered. Her words sliced through the quiet house like a blade. Not whispered, not cautious, said boldly as if I were not just absent but irrelevant. And then, I heard it. My son's laugh. Not an uncomfortable chuckle. Not a confused hum. A real laugh. The kind he used to give me when he was a little boy telling me a silly joke. Only this time, the joke was me. I stood there holding a tray of tea I had just prepared for them. Tea they asked for. Tea I had made with the same love I had shown them for 2 years. My hands trembled so violently the cups clinked against the metal tray. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop the tears. Not because I was weak, but because I couldn't believe what I had heard. I had spent my entire life loving that boy, raising him, feeding him, sacrificing for him, supporting him through every heartbreak, every failure, every success. And now he laughed, while the woman he chose to marry tore me apart with her words. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. Then I did something I never expected. I pretended not to hear, not because I wanted to ignore it, not because I accepted it, but because my body froze in a way I never felt before. A shock so deep it numbed me. I steadied the tray and stepped away from the doorway before they could see me. But something inside me cracked that day. Not a little crack. Not one that heals overnight. A deep fracture. A breaking of trust, of love, of the illusion I had been desperately holding on to. White medium star, a mother's heartbreak isn't loud. It's silent. I walked back into the kitchen slowly, each step heavier than the last. The walls felt smaller. The air felt colder. The world felt unfamiliar. I set the tray down on the counter and tried to gather myself. My daughter-in-law's voice echoed in my mind. "That fat old lady disgusts me." Old, fat, disgusting. 3 words that shouldn't have had power, yet they hit me harder than any slap. Because they came from someone I let into my home. Someone I welcomed like a daughter. Someone I cooked for, cleaned for, helped when she was overwhelmed, comforted when she cried after arguments with my son. Someone I believed would become family. But she saw me as nothing more than a burden. Something unpleasant she had to tolerate until she could take what she wanted. And my son, my own flesh and blood, did nothing. He laughed. He laughed. The realization was a knife twisting in my chest. White medium star, the effort they never saw. I stared at my hands. Hands that had cooked countless meals, washed endless dishes, held my grandchildren, wiped tears off little cheeks, and worked tirelessly to keep the home running. Hands that had comforted my son when he thought his world was falling apart. These same hands were shaking now. And suddenly, I felt every inch of exhaustion I had been ignoring for years. I remembered the nights I stayed up late preparing dinners because they were too tired. The early mornings when I tiptoed around to let them sleep. The days I babysat without question. The bills I paid quietly. The favors I did without being asked. Not once did I complain. Because that's what mothers do. We love. We give. We pour ourselves out until there's nothing left. But in return, mockery, cruelty, disrespect. From a woman I barely knew. And from a son I thought I knew completely. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart ached in a way that had nothing to do with age or weight. It was the ache of betrayal. White medium star, the moment resolve began to form as I forced myself to breathe. Something shifted inside me. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't explosive. It was slow, like embers glowing beneath ash. A warmth rising from deep in my chest. A realization. If I didn't stand up for myself, no one ever would. Not my son. Not my daughter-in-law. Not anyone. I had spent years being quiet, accommodating, avoiding conflict, trying to be the easy mother-in-law. But where did that get me? Invisible, disrespected, mocked behind my back, and now right in front of my face. The tears dried on my cheeks. My shaking stopped. and that small ember inside me grew hotter. I wasn't weak. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't a burden. I was a woman who had survived far more than this. Losing my parents. Losing my husband. Raising a child alone. Building a life from nothing. What was one cruel daughter-in-law compared to everything I'd already overcome? I stood up straighter, wiped my eyes, and lifted my chin. Because if they thought I would stay quiet after this, they were wrong. Very wrong. White medium star, a crack that would soon become a quake. I picked up the tray again. Steadier this time. As I walked toward the living room, I didn't feel like a servant anymore. I felt like a storm preparing to break. They didn't know I heard them. They didn't see the fire growing behind my calm expression. But they would. And soon, they would learn the truth. The woman they mocked was the same woman who held all the power in the home they took for granted. Something had cracked inside me that day, and that crack would become the earthquake that changed everything. I placed the tray on the coffee table with a smile I had practiced for years. Soft enough to seem gentle, pleasant enough to avoid conflict, forgiving enough to keep the peace. "Tea is ready," I said, my voice steady despite the storm building in my chest. Neither of them even glanced at me. My son didn't lift his head from his phone. His thumbs kept tapping the screen, his face lit by a glow that seemed to interest him far more than his own mother. My daughter-in-law looked up just long enough to pull the corners of her mouth into a smile so stiff and artificial it might as well have been painted on. "Thanks," she muttered, but not to me, to the air, to the room, to the universe. Certainly not to the woman who had just prepared tea with trembling hands and a breaking heart. They continued their conversation, laughing, whispering, scrolling, gossiping, without even acknowledging that I stood there. I hovered for a moment, unsure whether to sit or walk away, but their indifference answered for me. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a person. I wasn't even a background character. I was furniture, a ghost, an inconvenience taking up space in a home that I paid for, maintained, and lovingly nurtured for decades. My heart tightened. How did I become invisible in my own house? White medium star, the weight of silence. I sat quietly in the armchair across from them, folding my hands in my lap, watching them chat as if I didn't exist. They talked about weekend plans, about new outfits she wanted to buy, about a friend's party they were excited for. Not once did they ask how my day was. Not once did they look at me. Not once did they say, "Sit with us. Join the conversation. Mom, are you okay?" I had become a shadow moving through hallways, sweeping floors, doing laundry, cooking meals, and smiling at people who didn't see me. Some people say silence is peaceful. But there's another kind of silence, a suffocating silence. The kind that exists when you are surrounded by people who pretend you're not there. That kind of silence? It breaks you slowly, piece by piece. White medium star, the memories that cut deeply. I looked at my son. The same boy whose tiny hand clung to mine on the first day of school. The same boy who cried into my shoulder when his pet hamster died. The same boy who sat beside me for hours studying spelling words and math problems. The same boy who once said, "Mom, you're my favorite person in the whole world." Now he didn't even look at me when I walked into the room. He used to lean on me for everything. Now he couldn't even say thank you. My daughter-in-law whispered something and laughed softly. He laughed with her, a laugh he didn't share with me anymore. I wondered when it happened, the moment I stopped matching. Was it gradual? Did it vanish when he got married? Did my daughter-in-law slowly replace me in his world until there was no room left? Or was I always destined to become that woman who raised him, but not someone important enough to treat with kindness? The thought stung deeper than words ever could. White medium star, when kindness is taken for granted. I watched my daughter-in-law reach for the cup I poured, her wrist adorned with the bracelet I bought her last Christmas. She didn't thank me for the gift then either. She only said, "It's not my usual style, but okay." I remembered the way she'd pushed a plate away once, saying, "You use too much oil in your cooking. We'll just order something." I remembered her asking me to watch their child just for an hour, which turned into 5 hours, then 7, then an entire evening without even a text checking in. I remembered her telling my son, Your mom needs to understand her place. At the time, I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe I misunderstood. But now it was clear. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. They didn't see me. They only used me. And the worst part? I allowed it. Because I wanted harmony. I wanted family. I wanted to be loved. But instead, all I received was tolerance, barely. White medium star, the moment my heart hardened, my son suddenly looked at me. But not with affection. With irritation. Mom, can you turn the AC down? It's too cold in here. I hadn't touched the thermostat. But I nodded anyway and stood up. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even look at me as I left the room. My daughter-in-law didn't pause her conversation. She didn't offer to get up herself. She didn't smile or acknowledge me. And something inside me hardened. Slowly, silently, deliberately. Not anger. Not bitterness. Resolve. The kind of resolve that forms when a woman finally wakes up from years of being mistreated. The kind of resolve that grows when the people you sacrificed everything for repay you with indifference. I realized something important, something painful, something true. People only treat you as poorly as you allow them. And I had allowed too much. White medium star, my invisibility was ended that day as I walked down the hallway to adjust the AC. I felt the heaviness lift from my shoulders. Not all at once, but gradually, like chains loosening. They thought I was weak. They thought I was dependent. They thought I would never stand up for myself. But they were wrong. Because behind the silence, behind the tears, behind the years of kindness, I was stronger than they knew. And I was done being invisible. They didn't know it yet. But the way they treated me today would change everything. My life, my home, their future. They had no idea what was coming. But they would soon learn. When you disrespect a woman who has loved you unconditionally, you awaken a strength you never knew she had. For 2 long years, I cooked for them. Not just meals. Comfort, warmth, effort, and love served on plates they never appreciated. I cleaned their rooms, washed their clothes, folded their laundry with the same tenderness I used when folding my son's baby onesies decades ago. I babysat their children at a moment's notice, sometimes early mornings, sometimes late into the night, because you're already home, Mom. As if my home existed only to make their lives easier. I paid bills when they were short on money. Electric bills, car payments, groceries they couldn't afford because of unexpected expenses. Though those expenses always seemed to look like new handbags, new shoes, and fancy dinners posted online. And through all of this, I pretended not to hear their whispered comments about my weight. She eats too much, I heard once. She moves so slow. Another time, do you think she'll lose weight if she joins a gym? I doubt she'll even fit in the machines. My daughter-in-law would say it with a giggle, smiling behind her manicured hand. And my son, the boy I raised with everything I had, would brush it off like it was harmless teasing. Whenever I flinched, hurt leaking through the cracks of my forced smile, my son would say, "Mom, don't be sensitive. She's just joking." Joking. Funny how the people doing the hurting are always the first ones to say it's just a joke. Funny how those jokes only ever go one way. And I, wanting peace more than pride, chose silence. Because silence keeps the family together, right? Because silence avoids arguments. Because silence smooths over rough edges. Because silence keeps the peace. But silence also kills you slowly. It steals your dignity one comment at a time. It makes you smaller, quieter, less visible. Convinces you that your pain doesn't matter. That you don't matter. And for 2 years, I swallowed that pain like bitter medicine. I wanted them to feel welcome. I wanted my son to feel supported. I wanted my grandchildren to grow up in a loving home. But somewhere along the way, something twisted. My kindness, the very thing that once made our home warm and peaceful, became their opportunity to disrespect me. Little comments became sharper. Requests became demands. Favors became expectations. My time became theirs. My energy became theirs. My home slowly became theirs. And I allowed it. Not because I was weak, but because I believed love required endurance. I believed my patience would eventually inspire gratitude. I believed my sacrifices would eventually be recognized. I believed my son would eventually see how hard I was trying. But that day, when my daughter-in-law called me a fat old lady, and my son laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly, but freely, everything inside me shifted. Something warm inside me turned cold. Something gentle turned hard. Something soft turned sharp. That moment was not the first insult. It wasn't the first disrespect. It wasn't the first crack in the foundation. But it was the moment the entire wall collapsed. I had been excusing their behavior for years. She's young. He's stressed. They don't mean it. It's not worth the trouble. But when the people you love show you repeatedly how little they value you, you eventually believe them. That day, standing in my own living room, unseen and unheard, I realized something brutal and clear. They didn't love me. They loved what I did for them. They loved the meals, not the hands that cooked them. They loved the clean clothes, not the woman folding them. They loved the babysitting, not the grandmother providing it. They loved the money, not the mother giving it. They loved the convenience of me, not the humanity of me. And once you realize someone doesn't see your humanity, you cannot unsee it. My daughter-in-law didn't see a mother-in-law. She saw a maid, a cook, a free babysitter, a woman who existed to make her life easier. And my son, my flesh and blood, saw me the same way. Not intentionally, not cruelly, but carelessly. And sometimes carelessness hurts more than hatred ever could. Because hatred recognizes your existence. Carelessness erases it. White medium star, what broke me also freed me. I stood in that living room doorway with a tray of tea, listening to the two people I loved most mock me without hesitation, without guilt, without even lowering their voices. And I realized, kindness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. I had given too much. Given too freely, given without expecting respect in return. And now they believed I needed them more than they needed me. They believed I would tolerate anything, endure anything, accept anything. They believed they could treat me as small as they wanted because I made myself small to keep the peace. But that moment, when they mocked me openly, that was the moment I stopped being small. That was the moment I realized kindness means nothing to people who lack empathy. That was the moment I realized, if I kept letting them treat me this way, I would disappear completely. And I refused to disappear. I refused to fade into the background of my own life. My heart broke that day, but the cracks let the light in. The light of truth. The light of courage. The light of self-respect. And the woman who walked out of that room was not the same woman who had walked in with a tray of tea. She was stronger. She was done being invisible. She was ready to change everything. That night, long after the house grew silent and the lights were off, I stood alone in front of my bedroom mirror. No makeup, no soft lighting, no filters, just me. A raw, honest reflection I could no longer hide from. My hair, once thick and dark, now streaked with gray that crept in faster after my husband died. Grief ages you in ways no one warns you about. My face, lined not from time alone, but from years of worry, years of swallowing my pain, years of forcing smiles when my heart was breaking. My body, heavier than it used to be, not from laziness as my DIL liked to imply, but from stress, from grief, from loneliness, from pouring everything I had into everyone else and leaving nothing for myself. I looked at my own eyes, tired, sad, dimmed. And for the first time in years, I didn't look away. I reached up and touched the glass, my fingers trembling lightly against my reflection. "You don't deserve this," I whispered, for simple words, yet the truest thing I had said to myself in a long time. I didn't deserve the insults. I didn't deserve the mockery. I didn't deserve the whispered jokes behind my back. I didn't deserve to be treated like a burden in a house I owned, maintained, and filled with love for decades. I didn't deserve to feel small, or invisible, or ashamed of simply existing. I had lost my husband, the only person who ever made me feel truly seen, and in my loneliness, I had let my son and his wife fill the silence with disrespect. But grief does strange things to a heart. It makes you cling to whatever family you have left, even if they hurt you without realizing it. Even if they take advantage of you. Even if they forget that you are a person, not a machine. I stared at myself for a long time, long enough for tears to pool in my eyes, but not fall. Because this time I wasn't crying out of sadness. I was awakening, a slow, powerful awakening. For the first time in years, I chose myself, not them, not their comfort, not their expectations, not their approval. Me, my peace, my dignity, my value. Even if choosing myself meant hurting them, even if it meant shocking them, even if it meant breaking the illusion of the obedient, convenient, ever-giving mother they thought would never change, especially because they needed a shock. For too long, I had taught them that my boundaries were flexible, that my feelings were optional, that my pain was invisible, that my presence was guaranteed no matter how poorly they treated me. But I wasn't going to teach them that anymore. I wasn't going to teach my son that it was acceptable for a man to laugh when a woman is mocked, especially when that woman is his mother. I wasn't going to teach my daughter-in-law that she could belittle me and still enjoy the benefits of my home, my cooking, my time, and my generosity. I wasn't going to teach myself that silence was easier than self-respect. I wiped the tears from my cheeks, not gently, but with a firmness that felt symbolic. And then something happened. I smiled. A small, sad, bittersweet smile, but strong. Strong in a way I hadn't felt since before my husband passed away. Because suddenly, I knew everything was about to change. Not tomorrow, not someday, tonight. This new version of me, the one staring fiercely back from the mirror. She wasn't someone they could manipulate. She wasn't someone they could disrespect. She wasn't someone they could laugh at without consequences. She wasn't someone who would stay quiet. She wasn't someone who would tolerate cruelty under the disguise of jokes. She wasn't someone who existed only to serve others. She wasn't someone who feared being alone, because being alone was far kinder than being surrounded by people who made me feel lonely. For the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. Not loud powerful, not angry powerful, quiet powerful. The kind of power that comes from knowing your worth. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout. The kind of power that doesn't need permission. I ran my hand down the side of the mirror, inhaling deeply. "This ends tomorrow," I whispered. The disrespect, the invisibility, the exhaustion, the quiet acceptance of their cruelty. All of it. My daughter-in-law thought I was weak. My son thought I was dependent. They both thought I would endure anything rather than disturb the peace. But they were wrong. I wasn't weak. I was patient. I wasn't dependent. I was loyal. I wasn't afraid of conflict. I was afraid of losing what little family I had left. But now, I feared nothing more than losing myself. I turned away from the mirror, the soft glow of the lamp casting my shadow on the wall. A shadow that felt taller, fuller, stronger. Tomorrow, they would see a version of me they weren't prepared for. Not the woman who made tea silently. Not the woman who cleaned up their messes. Not the woman who swallowed their insults. But the woman who finally remembered, I am not a burden. I am not weak. I am not theirs to mold. I am mine. And for the first time in years, I walked toward my bed not feeling tired but reborn. Before my husband died, he left everything in my name. Everything. Heavy Checkmark the house he spent 30 years paying off. Heavy Checkmark the savings we built together through sacrifice. Heavy Checkmark the farmland he inherited from his father. Heavy Checkmark, and a life insurance payout large enough to guarantee comfort for the rest of my life. My son always assumed it would automatically become his. As if marriage and adulthood entitled him to everything we worked for. My daughter-in-law assumed I was too naive, too old-fashioned, too soft to understand finances. She thought I didn't know how wills worked. She thought I didn't understand deeds or legal documents. She thought I didn't know the value of what I owned. She thought wrong, because what neither of them knew was this. My husband left me something far more valuable than assets. He left me a letter, a warning, a truth only he foresaw. I remember the day I found it, 6 months after his funeral, when the house still echoed with memories that felt too painful to touch. I was cleaning out his bedside drawer, expecting to find old receipts and forgotten coins, when my hand brushed against an envelope with my name written in his handwriting. Old, shaky, but unmistakably his. My breath caught. I sat on the edge of the bed, the afternoon sunlight spilling across the room, and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single page, written with the clarity of a man who had loved me deeply, protected me fiercely, and understood people better than they understood themselves. His handwriting flowed across the page. My love, if you are reading this, then I am no longer there to speak for you. So let this letter speak in my place. My eyes blurred with tears before I even reached the second line. You are strong, even when you forget it. You are kind, even when others don't deserve it. But your kindness is also your weakness. People will try to take advantage of that. I swallowed hard. Even in death, he knew me better than anyone alive. Do not let anyone disrespect you in your own home. Those words hit me like thunder. He knew. He predicted this. He understood exactly what could happen. A future where I lived quietly, lovingly, and others mistook my gentle nature for helplessness. I kept reading. Protect your dignity, even if it means protecting it from our own son. My breath caught in my throat. Our son. His warning wasn't cruel. It was protective. He wasn't accusing, he was preparing me. He knew human nature. He knew that entitlement grows quickly in the hearts of the ungrateful. He knew my son might one day see my assets as his future, not my present. He also knew my daughter-in-law would influence him. He knew I needed strength after he was gone, the kind of strength I never had to use while he was alive because he always shielded me. At the bottom of the letter, he had written, do not give anyone power over your life, not even out of love. Stand tall, stand firm, stand for yourself. And remember, everything is yours because you earned it, not them. When I finished reading, I clutched the letter against my chest and cried. Not just from grief, but from understanding. My husband had given me more than money, more than property, more than legal rights. He gave me permission to stop shrinking, permission to stop sacrificing myself, permission to defend my own worth. His letter became my shield, my reminder, my awakening. And now, years later, on the night I heard my son laugh at my pain and my daughter-in-law insult my very existence, that letter returned to me like a voice echoing through time. Stand tall, stand firm, stand for yourself. Those words burned in my mind. They didn't know I had that letter. They didn't know my husband left me in charge of everything. They didn't know the home they disrespected me in belonged completely to me. Every rule, every decision, every boundary mine. Legally, emotionally, rightfully. But I hadn't acted like it. I had acted like a guest, caretaker, a servant, not the owner, not the matriarch, not the woman my husband believed I was. But that night, the woman in the mirror, the woman with gray in her hair and strength returning to her spine, was ready to honor her husband's final message. I would protect my dignity, even if it meant upsetting them, even if it meant changing everything, even if it meant losing the fragile, one-sided peace I had been clinging to. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in my bedside drawer, but this time not as something to remember him by. This time it became the fuel behind my plan. A plan I would put into action in the morning. A plan they would never see coming. A plan that would change the entire dynamic of our household. A plan that would finally teach them. The fat old lady they mocked was not weak. She was the owner. She was the protector. She was the storm they should have feared. And tomorrow, the storm would begin. The next morning, everything changed. Not gradually, not subtly, not piece by piece. All at once. For the first time in years, I woke up without rushing. I didn't hurry to the kitchen. I didn't check the fridge. I didn't take meat out to thaw or vegetables out to chop. I didn't start coffee for them or begin preparing breakfast. I simply breathed. Then I walked to the dining table, made myself a single cup of tea, just the way I like it, extra cardamom, little milk, and opened my favorite book. Silence wrapped around me. Not the suffocating kind I'd grown used to, but a peaceful silence. a silence that felt like home. For the first time in a long time, this house felt like mine again. No breakfast on the table. No laundry folded neatly on the couch. No dishes washed and drying on the rack. No toys sorted. No floors swept. No chores quietly completed before anyone else woke up. Nothing. And it felt good. Like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 2 years. I took a slow sip of tea, savoring the warmth as it slid down my throat. That's when I heard footsteps. Fast, irritated, impatient. My daughter-in-law stumbled into the dining room, hair messy, robe tied lazily, eyes still puffy from sleep. She stopped dead in her tracks. The confusion on her face was instant. The audacity followed a moment later. "Aren't you making breakfast?" she snapped, hands on her hips. I didn't look up right away. I finished my sentence, turned the page, placed my bookmark. Then, finally, I raised my eyes to meet hers. "No," I said calmly. One word. Soft, gentle, but powerful enough to shake the very foundation of how she viewed me. Her eyes widened. "No?" she repeated like she'd never heard the word before. "Why not?" "Because," I said, taking another sip of tea, "I don't feel like it." She blinked rapidly, as if her brain was struggling to compute a version of reality where I didn't jump to serve her every whim. Before she could respond, I heard heavier footsteps coming down the hallway. My son walked in, scratching his head, confused. "Mom?" he said, glancing around the empty kitchen. "What's going on? Why isn't breakfast ready?" I closed my book gently and set it down. No anger, no raised voice, no theatrics, just truth. "I heard everything you two said yesterday," I said quietly. The color drained from their faces. Instantly, my daughter-in-law froze. My son stopped breathing for a moment. They looked at each other, then back at me. What do you mean?" my son stuttered. I tilted my head slightly. "I mean," I said slowly, "that I heard you call me a fat old lady, and I heard you laugh at it." Silence. Thick, heavy, guilt-shaped. My daughter-in-law opened her mouth, ready to spit out a lie, but I lifted a hand. "No," I said. "Don't bother denying it." Her lips snapped shut. My son swallowed hard. "Mom, we didn't mean—" "Don't," I said again. "Please, don't insult me further by pretending it was a misunderstanding." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking small, ashamed, exposed. Good. They needed to feel the weight of their actions for once. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked toward the kitchen counter. Not rushed, not flustered, steady, controlled, stronger than yesterday. "You've both taken advantage of my kindness for a long time," I began softly. But hearing those words, hearing my own son laugh at me, my voice wavered, not from weakness, but from honesty. That was the moment I realized I am no longer respected in my own home. Their eyes widened again. My daughter-in-law crossed her arms defensively. "Look, if you're upset." I held up one finger, the universal signal to stop. Her jaw clicked shut. "For 2 years," I continued, "I made this house comfortable for you. I cooked, cleaned, babysat, paid bills, stayed quiet, smiled through insults, and swallowed pain. But that ends today." My son stepped forward, panic creeping into his voice. "Mom, we're sorry, okay? It was just a joke." I let out a soft laugh. Not amused, not bitter, sad. A mother's laugh when she realizes her child has grown into a stranger. "A joke," I repeated. "Do you know what jokes are supposed to do? Make someone laugh." But I didn't laugh. I hurt. That makes it cruelty, not comedy. His mouth closed. My daughter-in-law looked away, chewing her lip. I walked back to the table, picked up my tea, and said with finality, "I will no longer tolerate disrespect in this home. Not from outsiders. Not from family. Not from either of you." Their bodies stiffened, because for the first time, they weren't looking at the meek, quiet, accommodating woman they were used to. They were looking at someone new, someone firm, someone done bending, someone awakened. someone they had underestimated for far too long. "What does that mean, Mom?" my son asked, voice trembling slightly. I took a breath. "It means," I said slowly, "that this house is about to run very differently, and you two are about to learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Their faces went white. Good. Fear was the first step toward respect, and respect was the first step toward reclaiming my life. "Mom, it was a joke," my son stammered, his voice shaking just enough to reveal the truth. He wasn't sorry. He was scared he got caught. "A joke," I repeated slowly, raising one eyebrow. I let the silence stretch long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then, softly, but with the force of 1,000 unsaid words, I asked, "Calling me a fat old lady? One who disgusts you? That's a joke to you?" My daughter-in-law didn't even flinch. She folded her arms over her chest, chin tilted upward with the confidence of someone who had never been held accountable for her cruelty. "Well," she said, shrugging, "if you're so offended, maybe you should lose some weight." The room went still. The audacity, the disrespect, the cruelty dripping from every syllable. Her words were knives, not accidental slips of the tongue, but deliberate stabs aimed to wound. I felt them, deep, but the deeper pain wasn't her insult. It was what came next. My son didn't defend me, didn't correct her, didn't even look at her in disbelief. He just stood there, silent. Silent while the woman he supposedly loved disrespected the woman who raised him. Silent while cruelty filled the air like poison. Silent while I waited, just for a moment, for him to show me even an ounce of loyalty. Just one word, "Hey, that's my mom. Don't talk to her like that." Just one gesture. A step forward, a hand raised, a shake of the head. Anything. But he stood there, frozen, eyes darting between us like a child caught between parents, yet refusing to step in. His silence echoed louder than any insult his wife could ever throw at me. Because a stranger's cruelty can be ignored, but your own child's indifference? That hits the soul. It tells you exactly where you stand in their life, exactly how replaceable they think you are, exactly how little they value your dignity. I stared at him, searching his face for a flicker of remorse, a sign that he recognized the cruelty taking place, a sign that he understood how deeply those words cut. But there was nothing, just guilt, and discomfort, and fear, not for me but for the consequences he knew were coming. But remorse, regret, love, none. And that silence, that cold, heavy, suffocating silence, hurt more than any insult ever could. Because my daughter-in-law's cruelty was expected. She had shown me who she was long ago. But my son, my boy, he was supposed to love me. He was supposed to support me, protect me, stand up for me when others tried to tear me down. That's what I taught him. That's the value I raised him with. That's the heart I believed he inherited. Yet here he stood, mute, passive, complicit. He didn't stop her. He didn't correct her. He didn't apologize. He didn't take my side. He just stood there, silent, choosing comfort over courage, choosing her over me. My chest tightened as a realization spread through me like cold water. He wasn't just allowing her disrespect. He was enabling it. Because when good people stay silent, cruelty wins. And in that moment, my son, the child I had fed, bathed, sacrificed for, cried over, became a spectator to my humiliation. His silence was agreement. His silence was acceptance. His silence was betrayal. I inhaled slowly, letting the truth settle. Not to hurt myself, but to finally see clearly the reality I had been denying for far too long. My value in this house wasn't measured by love or respect. It was measured by utility. As long as I was useful, cooking, cleaning, babysitting, paying bills, I was tolerated. But the moment I stopped, the moment I spoke up, the moment I demanded decency, I became an inconvenience, a burden, something to mock. My daughter-in-law smirked, clearly satisfied with how the exchange was going. She thought she had won. She thought her words landed. She thought her cruelty put me in my place. But what she didn't understand was this. Her insult didn't break me. My son's silence did, and that silence woke something inside me. Something old, something buried, something powerful. A version of myself my late husband always saw. A version I had forgotten. A version I desperately needed to reclaim. With steady hands, I set the teacup down. I looked from her to him and felt my voice stiffen. Not with anger, but with clarity. You both showed me exactly who you are, I said quietly. And now, I'm going to show you who I am. They shifted uncomfortably. Good. Because the woman standing before them now was not the one who had served them for 2 years. She wasn't the silent mother. She wasn't the forgiving mother. She wasn't the accommodating mother. She was the mother who had finally seen their true colors. And she was done accepting scraps of respect. My son swallowed hard, sensing the shift. Mom, please. Don't make this bigger than it is. I finally smiled. Not kindly, not sadly, but knowingly. Oh, I said. It's already bigger than you think. Because this moment, this silence, this betrayal was the turning point. The line they crossed. The final straw. And now, everything was about to change. I stood up slowly, deliberately, letting the weight of my words fill the room like a storm cloud ready to break. I will no longer live in a home where I am insulted and mistreated. The air shifted. You could feel it thick, heavy, electric. My son's brows knit together, confused and annoyed, as if he were the one being wronged. What does that mean? He demanded. I didn't flinch. Not this time. Not anymore. It means, I said firmly, my voice steady as steel, you both need to move out. Silence. Then outrage. Their mouths dropped open in perfect sync, like 2 actors reading from the same terrible script. What? You can't do that. This is our home. There it was. The entitlement. The audacity. The belief that they were owed everything I had. Simply because I was their mother. I didn't react. Instead, I reached calmly for the file I had placed on the dining table the night before. A thick, neatly organized folder full of documents they had never bothered to ask about. I'm glad you brought that up, I said, sliding the file open. My daughter-in-law rolled her eyes. Oh, please, she scoffed. You don't even understand half of those papers. Wrong thing to say. Very wrong. I lifted my gaze to hers. Steady, unblinking. My name, I began, tapping the first document with my finger, is on the deed. I could see the first crack in her expression. Confusion mixed with dread. I turned the page. My name is on every legal document. I flipped another. My name is on the bank accounts. Page after page signed, sealed, undeniable. Their confidence began to evaporate. And this home, I said, closing the file softly, is mine. My husband left it to me. Their shock was delicious. My son's eyes widened, panic sliding across his face like a shadow. Mom, Dad wouldn't. He wouldn't just leave everything to you. I raised an eyebrow. He did, because he trusted me to protect what he built. And because he knew exactly how things might turn out. My daughter-in-law sputtered. Well then we should have been told. We deserve to know the financial situation of the household. I tilted my head. Do you? Why? She blinked. Because we live here. That, I said slowly, was a privilege, not a right. Her mouth fell open. My son stepped forward. Mom, let's be reasonable. I held up my hand. No, I have been reasonable for 2 years. I have bent over backwards to accommodate you both. I have given, sacrificed, and tolerated far more than I should have. They exchanged a look, fear creeping into their expressions now. Good. It was time they understood. You don't get to disrespect me and continue living under my roof, I continued. This is my home, not yours, and I will not allow this environment to continue. My daughter-in-law scoffed again, but this time it wavered. You can't just kick us out. I smiled. Oh, I already have. She paled. My son's jaw clenched. What are we supposed to do? He asked quietly, the first sign of humility I'd heard in years. Figure it out, I said simply. Like adults. Mom. No, I interrupted. I'm done being interrupted. I'm done being dismissed. I'm done being mistreated. I stood taller, my voice unwavering. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The room stayed silent, utterly silent. They stared at me like the ground beneath their feet had disappeared, like they finally recognized the power I'd held all along, like the realization was too big, too overwhelming, too undeniable. Their faces told me everything. They never thought I would stand up for myself. They thought I needed them. They thought I wouldn't dare. They thought wrong. My daughter-in-law's voice shook when she finally spoke. You're serious? Yes, I said. Deadly serious. My son looked at me, eyes filled with something almost childlike, fear mixed with disbelief. Mom, please, let's just talk about this. We didn't mean it. You know we love you. I gave him a sad, quiet smile. No, I said. You love what I do for you. You don't love me. If you did, you would never have let someone insult me. And you would never have laughed. His shoulders dropped as the truth hit him like a punch. I picked up my tea and my book and walked toward my bedroom door. Before I stepped inside, I paused. And remember, I said without turning around, this house is mine, and so is my peace. I'm taking both back. I closed the door gently, not slammed, not angrily, just firmly, the way a person closes a chapter. Behind the door, I heard whispers. What are we going to do? She can't do this. We don't have the money to move. Why didn't you stop me from saying that yesterday? It's your fault too. Call a lawyer. She is the lawyer's client. Don't you get it? Oh my God. She's really kicking us out. I sat on my bed, breathing deeply, feeling something rise inside me. Strength, relief, peace. For the first time in years, I felt in control. For the first time in years, I felt respected. All because I had finally remembered something important. Being a mother doesn't mean being a doormat. And being a widow doesn't mean being weak. This was my home, my life, my dignity, and I was done letting anyone take it from me. At first, they thought I was bluffing. Of course they did. For 2 years, I had been the soft one, the accommodating one, the forgiving one, the woman who said it's fine when it wasn't, the woman who cleaned messes she didn't make, the woman who swallowed every insult just to keep peace. They didn't believe I had a spine because I hadn't shown it. But the next morning, everything shifted again. Their panic became real the moment the official notice from my lawyer arrived. A neatly printed document, signed, stamped, legally binding, delivered right into their entitled hands. My son read it twice. My daughter-in-law read it 3 times. And then the panic began. Suddenly, heavy checkmark my son apologized heavy checkmark my Dale pretended to be sweet heavy checkmark. They bought me flowers heavy checkmark. They cleaned the house for the first time in years. It was almost cinematic. Watching them transform overnight into polite, helpful, sugary sweet versions of themselves. My son approached me first. Mom, I'm really sorry, he said softly, his voice trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was stupid. Please forgive me. Not because he meant it, but because he was scared. My daughter-in-law sashayed into the kitchen minutes later with the fakest smile I'd ever seen. Let me help you cook today, she chirped. I stared at her. This was the same woman who once said, your food is too oily. We'll just order something. Now she suddenly wanted to chop onions with me? Please. Then came the flowers. A big bouquet, expensive, dramatic, clearly bought in desperation. We thought you deserved something nice, my son said. Something nice? I had deserved respect every single day for 2 years, but they were offering flowers as if that erased everything. I accepted them politely, put them in a vase, then never mentioned them again. And then, the cleaning. They scrubbed the house from top to bottom, vacuumed the stairs, mopped the floors, washed the dishes without being asked, wiped counters they had never noticed before. My daughter-in-law even tried smiling at me every time she passed by, like we were suddenly best friends. But here's the thing. Apologies that come only after consequences are not apologies. They are strategies. And I wasn't interested in strategy. I wasn't interested in manipulation disguised as kindness, in desperation disguised as remorse, in effort disguised as love. They weren't doing these things because they valued me. They were doing them because losing the house terrified them. They weren't taking responsibility. They were doing damage control. And I had no intention of rewarding manipulation. I remained polite, calm, civil, but unmoved. When my son asked, "Mom, does this mean we can stay?" I answered simply, "No, the decision is final." And when my daughter-in-law said, "We've changed, doesn't that matter?" I replied, "Change that happens only because you're about to lose something is not real change." Her face twisted in frustration. For the first time, she realized manipulation wouldn't work. She couldn't guilt me. She couldn't charm me. She couldn't soften me. She had already lost. White medium star, the countdown begins day 10. They tried to negotiate. Day 15. They tried to bargain. Day 20. They tried to guilt me. Day 25. They grew angry. My son snapped one morning, "Mom, you're ruining this family." I looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said calmly. "Disrespect ruined this family. I'm just no longer pretending everything is fine." He had no response to that. My daughter-in-law tried one last tactic. "You're going to regret this. We're your only family." I smiled. A soft, sad smile of truth. "A family that insults and uses me is no family at all." She went silent. For the first time, she understood. She had played a game. And lost. White medium star, day 30. The final morning on the morning of day 30. I woke up before dawn. Not out of anxiety. Out of peace. The house felt lighter. Like it had been waiting to breathe again. I made myself breakfast. Just for me. Eggs. Toast. Tea. Simple. Warm. Free. I sat at the table watching the sun rise through the window. For once, I wasn't waiting on anyone. I wasn't cooking for anyone. I wasn't worrying about anyone's mood or expectations. I was simply living. At 10 a.m., they came downstairs with their bags. 3 suitcases each. Boxes stacked by the door. Their faces pale and exhausted from nights spent arguing, whispering, panicking. My son looked at me, eyes red as if he'd been crying. "Mom, this is really happening?" "Yes," I said gently. My daughter-in-law's voice cracked with anger. "You're heartless." I shook my head. "No, I just stopped sacrificing my heart for people who don't value it." My son swallowed hard. "Will you at least miss us?" I stood up slowly. "I miss the version of you who loved me," I said. "But that version hasn't existed for a long time." He looked down. There was nothing left to say. They carried their bags out the door. I didn't stop them. I didn't cry. I didn't waver. Not one tear was shed on my part. Not because I was harsh, but because I had finally learned the truth. Sometimes peace is more important than company. Sometimes dignity is more important than family. Sometimes letting people go is the only way to reclaim yourself. And as their car pulled out of the driveway, I closed the front door of my house. My house, with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. A quiet victory, a quiet freedom, a quiet beginning. Weeks passed. Not rushed, not chaotic. Slow, gentle weeks, each one softer than the one before. And with every passing day, my house felt lighter. The walls no longer echoed with tension. The air no longer felt heavy. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful, calm, warm, mine again. For the first time in years, I could walk from room to room without feeling judged, without being criticized, without being used. I didn't have to brace myself for insults. I didn't have to worry about footsteps stomping down the hall. I didn't have to anticipate the next sarcastic remark or ungrateful request. The house felt like a home again, because the poison had finally left. And in that peace, something unexpected happened. I began to rediscover myself. White medium star, reclaiming my life, I joined a walking group at the local park. At first, I was shy, unsure, self-conscious about my body, the same body my daughter-in-law mocked relentlessly. But a kind woman named June walked beside me on the first morning and said, "You have the warmest smile. I'm glad you came. No criticism, no judgment, just kindness." And with each walk, I felt stronger, lighter, more alive. I started eating healthier. Not because someone shamed me into it, but because I wanted to feel good in my own skin. I rediscovered the joy of trying new recipes, of cooking just for myself, of eating in peace. I redecorated the home my husband left me. New curtains, fresh paint, plants in the windows, warm lights in the hallway, small touches that made the house feel like me again. And as I stood in my living room one afternoon, sunlight streaming through the windows, I realized something. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to others. Not to myself. I wasn't mocked. I wasn't dismissed. I wasn't treated like a burden. I was a woman rediscovering her strength. Piece by piece, day by day. A woman rebuilding her identity. A woman who had learned, the hard way, that silence isn't peace. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. White medium star, the son who chose the wrong side. As for my son, he calls sometimes, never with her. Always alone. Always hesitant. He asks me how I'm doing. If I need anything. If I want to see the kids. And I answer politely, warmly even. But I no longer let guilt control me. His voice used to make me crumble inside. The guilt of disappointing him. The fear of losing him. The hope that he'd choose me over convenience. Not anymore. He made his choice the moment he laughed at my pain. The moment he let his wife insult me without lifting a finger to stop her. The moment he allowed her cruelty to become normal in our home. A son who stands silently beside someone who mocks his own mother has chosen a side. And that side was not mine. Forgiveness does not mean access. Love does not mean letting people hurt you again. Family does not mean tolerating disrespect. So I speak to him, but carefully, cautiously, on my terms, because I will never again lose myself trying to hold on to someone who didn't hold on to me. White medium star, the woman who taught her own lesson, and she, my daughter-in-law, learned her lesson too, the hard way. She learned that when you call someone a fat old lady, you should be prepared for that woman to stand up, take her power back, and remove you from her life entirely. She learned that cruelty has consequences, that disrespect is expensive, that mocking someone's pain is a debt you eventually pay. She tried to apologize later, sent a long message filled with excuses and half-truths. I didn't mean it. I was stressed. I didn't know it hurt you. I was joking, but I didn't respond. Because apologies that come only after consequences are strategies, not sincerity. I wasn't interested in strategy, especially from someone who once looked at me like I was trash sitting in her way. She lost access to my home. She lost the comfort of free babysitting. She lost the safety of having someone clean up her messes. She lost the support she took for granted daily. But most of all, she lost the chance to mistreat me ever again. White medium star, the woman I became as I sit on my porch now, watching the evening sun paint the sky orange and pink. I feel something I haven't felt in years. Peace. Not quiet. Not numbness. Not forced calm. Real peace. Peace that comes from choosing myself. Peace that comes from setting boundaries. Peace that comes from finally understanding my worth. Because dignity is worth more than family who treats you like nothing. Respect is worth more than pretending everything is fine. Freedom is worth more than suffering in silence. And today, I am finally free. Free from their cruelty. Free from their entitlement. Free from their disrespect. free from the fear of what would happen if I stood up for myself. I am a woman reborn, a woman who lost everything, then found herself. A woman who discovered that the greatest love is the love you give yourself when no one else will. My house is quiet. My heart is full. My future is mine. And that is the greatest victory of all.